Can we confirm that Robin is with us? It looks like she's still joining.
Hello, I am in as a guest.
Wonderful.
Can you see me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you, Robin.
Okay, great. Can you see me now?
There she is.
There she is. Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we work through technology. So today we are going to talk about three main topics: what is changing in the tech market, and what does that mean for industry analysts, and then how does this affect analyst advocacy and the AR role. So to go ahead and kick us off, well, first let me mention we do welcome questions. So please use the tab up above that says Q&A, and we'll make sure to address those as they come up. So without further ado, Rachel, if you'd like to get the conversation started on what and how the tech market has been changing.
Thanks, Jane. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendees. Thanks for joining us today. I think that as analyst relations professionals, we can all agree that not since cloud has maybe a couple different technologies affected the tech industry in such a broad way. Everyone is affected by these two things that I'm going to point out, and I'm sure everyone can guess what they are. The first one being generative AI. Oh, shocker. And the second one is cybersecurity. I say this because, it's interesting as Duncan and Robin and I were kind of riffing on these topics last week. We were just discussing how it doesn't matter where you sit in tech. We are all being affected by this. And therefore, our companies as AR professionals are being asked, well, what is your strategy? What are you doing about this? Isn't it's just interesting to me. And I don't remember that since cloud. What do you think, Duncan?
I think obviously for me the main technology issue is just unmuting my mic. But yeah, I think everything kind of triples on, rolls out from that. I think what the shift towards AI has done has also made a big change in the world that every product manager is in, and it's made a lot of really significant changes for industry analysts. Suddenly every industry analyst in every functional area that is nothing to do with AI suddenly has to pretend to be an analyst. I mean, I know that's in Robin's bit later on, but that's certainly a very big change, because it means that vendors, when they are interacting with analyst firms, are getting dragged into conversations around AI where often they and the analysts are both laboring with quite naive ideas of what AI can do in their market. And then that's also happening with investors. Investors have always been subject to hype, shall we say, not exactly victims of hype, because it's been a good time to be an investor for most of the last 20 years. Maybe this year not going to be such good a year. This coming year maybe not quite so good for investors. But for all of these reasons, the shift in AI is pushing huge change into the way that product leaders, that customers, that vendors, that investors are talking about things, and then that in turn changes a whole series of things for folks.
I have a question for either of you. How do you think this AI trend has changed the market overall? So you mentioned investors, and I think you've seen investment dollars still going into that space, and also cybersecurity. But do you think, we all know the sad story of tech layoffs and the struggles that tech companies have had this year, but what about AI companies? Do we see a real difference in their success overall in the market?
Yeah, I think you picked out cybersecurity as another hotspot as well. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at these two market sectors, things are they're still growing, right? They're not maybe they're not as growing as fast now as they were. Richard Steenan has this huge database of cybersecurity firms, and I saw some data that he published recently looking at headcount in those firms and how that was changing. And headcount is not exactly the same as money, but it's you buy headcount with money, so it's very similar. And that definitely shows like cybersecurity firms still growing, but not as quickly as they were growing. And I think the challenge with AI is, like, firstly, every company is an AI company now, right? So I work for a public relations company, all right? We're a people business, but we are working as hard as possible to develop a unique series of processes and an AI stack, and really trying to see, we're intensively engaging in research to see, right, these are the areas where AI definitely doesn't work. We definitely don't want to use AI in, reports that go to clients. We don't want those to be written by AI. Like brainstorming, right? Okay, well, AI is pretty. So suddenly every company has to put AI use cases front and center, even if they're not a tech company. And I think that makes a very big. I think that makes a very big difference, both to the lived reality of these companies and to the rhetorical pictures that they draw, and the way that they move towards the future, the narratives that they're building about the future.
And Duncan, what I think is funny about that, though, is that that's where I see this kind of rift coming about between, like a marketing and the analyst relations field, right? Is because I think every company is just so focused on getting their name attached with AI, whether they're actually doing it or not. Maybe that's more machine learning than true AI. But I've noticed, at least in the space where I sit in data protection, that everyone's just trying to be relevant, and everyone's just trying to chase the buzz that is AI, make sure their name is out there, make sure when you're searching keywords that their company's coming up. And so I think all technology has been kind of pushed and urged to figure out what is your AI story. And then you have to figure out, as a marketer and then also as an AR person, how do you go and tell your respective audiences that story? So it's interesting.
Yeah, and we've had those kinds of. It's not unfair to call these like hype bubbles. It's not unfair to call them hype bubbles. We've had those before, 2007, 2008, before the credit crunch. Obviously, the dot-com boom. But the big difference is we had like low interest rates. The cost of capital was low. Investors did not really have to think slow before they pulled money out from their pockets. Now it's a very different situation.
Right.
If you think of what the hype bubbles do, they do push people towards, like, Rachel is very polite when she calls it relevance, but it does push people into conversations where maybe they're not expert and where they don't have a differentiating comment, and it means that some organizations move away from talking in a concrete enough way about the way that they're solving problems and the way their customers are heroes. They're moving away from talking about things in a concrete enough way that investors could understand that, and they are kind of rolling around in an AI version of ranch dressing, and you're not really sure what's in this salad. You can only taste the dressing. and I think that's very problematic, especially for organizations that are, that maybe don't have deep customer roots yet, as many AI companies don't, or companies that are still like pivoting to find their use cases. And I think because of the big vertical market changes in the economy, we're seeing a lot, even mid-sized organizations are pivoting between vertical market use cases quite inelegantly, and yeah, that's a challenge.
How have you seen the tech layoff, Rachel or Duncan, tech layoffs that we're all hearing and feeling affected by the change in the technologies? Like, do you see it happening in certain job titles that go across and certain functions? If you have AI skills, doesn't matter, you're going to be, being paid 5 times what I'm paid. Or is it specifically with AI, like real AI companies that are not laying off? Like, how do you see the relationship between these tech firms and layoffs? Like, should people jump ship to different kinds of firms?
Yeah, I personally, I haven't seen that in the market where I am day to day
Mhm.
working at a specific vendor. But I think the overall tech market is challenged by how much a tech person actually has to know today to
Right,
do their
right,
job effectively. It's very tricky. It's, gone are the days when you could just focus on like one little piece of tech. An admin is now needing to know so much more than just a specific, slice of the business. And I think that correlates to the reduction in force that we see because, companies are expecting more with less bodies
right.
and,
And AI,
everyone's,
AI fuels that in a lot of
yeah,
ways. I mean, it fuels, I think, the demands for lower level people for example,
hmm
because you can get a head start with AI where you may not need the junior people to do some of that basic work. So I think
yeah.
that might be affecting the trends.
I also,
Yeah.
Rachel, I think you pick a phrase very well when you talk about reduction in force, because that there are layoffs, but there are not only layoffs. There are also, I'm seeing, early retirements
Yeah,
happening.
Mhm.
I'm seeing people leaving jobs and then not being replaced. And the picture is very uneven. There are some organizations where, you might think, I don't know, like a big tech firm like IBM, right? I might have thought that IBM might be shrinking at the moment. IBM is actually growing, right? IBM's
right, right.
growing faster now, than it was last year. So some organizations are doing well, and particularly those that are, that are the engines of the AI transformation. I would imagine that IBM is one of those. Yeah.
Right,
So
exactly.
I'd say that for many organizations, it's been good. Definitely, again, working for a public relations agency, I work with organizations in, I speak to dozens of companies, and our clients are suffering. I mean, it's been a hard economy for us, right? But I'd say actually it feels like our clients have had a harder year than we have over the last year.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think the pressure on the sales and marketing machine has never been greater. I think
Totally.
areas where it's hard to show the connection between sales and activity may get curtailed, or not. The sun may not shine as brightly on those people. That definitely also means organizations are placing more emphasis on the small, narrow part of the funnel, and because of that, I think we can expect maybe some extremely uneven experiences as we get into next year, of organizations maybe not having as many leads high up on the funnel, not having awareness high up on the funnel that they needed. So it all plays through in quite an unstable and unsure kind of way.
It's interesting. We can talk about in a few minutes here when we get to how AR is changing in light of the bigger picture of marketing, which is not everything we do, but it's a big part. And as marketing changes, do people think of AR differently? So we'll get to that when we get to that part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a really good conversation you're having about that expansive nature of AI and cybersecurity, and how that's affecting the tech market. Karsten gave a kind of a question and an answer here. Her response is more, it's kind of like this idea of more with less bodies, but it's also different in that aspect. And they asked, does the panel see AR requiring a different spider diagram of skill sets and practitioners? So like a better understanding or functional partners. And do you see a beginning to hire for those sort of functional roles?
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry. I think when we talk about how the AR job is changing, we're going to hit on some of those things. Would you say, guys?
Mhm.
So maybe
We
what we can talk about now, unless Jane, you wanted to serve up the next topic.
Yeah, looks like that's the only question we have, which will be a nice lead in for our next two topics of conversation. Before we really focus on how AR is going to change and the role of it in 2024. Let's start with you, Robin, on discussing how these tech market changes are going to affect analysts and what you're seeing with them moving into 2024.
Yeah, I'll just share my perspective, which is somewhat limited compared to my my partners here who have a lot more vision, I think, into these topics. What I've seen, what I personally experienced is it's a lot harder to get time with analysts. So I interpret that because I don't know the exact cause. I think there's a bunch of factors to it. But I think confusion, hype, disruption, like we're experiencing now, just drives analyst activity up. Because every CIO and CEO and people running organizations right now has got to have for their organization some kind of AI strategy. And cybersecurity, again, they have to have that on the top of their agenda. And these are complicated topics and overwhelming topics, and that drives use of analysts and analyst research more than anything else. So I know it comes down to when I want to try to get a briefing or some time with an analyst, I'm getting put off for months. I'm not getting that time. So are you saying that, Rachel?
Yes, one of our analysts that we work with very closely. Recently, I asked, just to do a quick briefing with him, and the first availability I got was February, and I was like, "Wait, really?" So yeah, to your point, I mean, I do think that they are being inundated with the questions of, what do we do with this? How do we do with this? Who should we partner to do this? How do we make this, applicable to our business and what we're doing? And, I kind of feel for the analysts a little bit, right? Because, even though that is all happening and that's good for their business, on the other side, they have to still maintain a level of expertise and know what's happening with the vendors in the market, right?
Which I think is getting harder because I think you said it, Duncan, that every business is doing AI and every vendor has got an AI story. So every aspect of an analyst's business, any technology domain or industry they cover, that analyst now has to get some expertise on AI. They have to understand that because they have to understand how it fits into their domain that they cover. So they may not be an AI analyst, but they have to, today, everybody has to know that business, has to know that domain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's also, it's December, right? So it's always hard now, isn't it? You've got people who've got to take their holiday before it evaporates at the end of the year in lots of organizations. You've got many Gartner contracts coming up for renewal around now, lots of make or break decisions happening now. So you've got account managers reaching out much more actively over the last couple of months in order to drive up utilization so that people get a better feeling about how they are using Gartner. You've also got an awful lot of deadlines always for analysts that have to be delivered. You've got holiday coming up, so that maybe work that could have waited until the end of this month now has been submitted already because it needs to go through editorial processes early. So it's always a bit of a hectic time. But it's definitely true if you look at just the overall volume of briefings being secured by AR people, that is definitely lower this year than it was last year. Definitely. Yeah. And to be honest, I think last year it was probably lower than it was the year before. In my team, we've had to work much harder on the quality of pitching, not only on the analyst relations side, but also our media relations colleagues. They're using an AI-driven tool called Propel, which I've mentioned to some people in the past, which helps track your pitches and compares the quality of your pitches. Small shifts in relevance make a big difference. And certainly we've been able, by really tracking our pitches and comparing the performance of our pitches, we've been able to increase the conversion rate, the yield on requests turning into real briefings. But analyst availability is the other bottleneck. And I think that partly there is this just like more swampy AI soup, a lot of which is a very thin gruel, and it's not very satisfying for analysts when they come to the end, when they come to the bottom of the bowl. So I think analysts are maybe a little bit more picky. You've got to show more value. And then the other thing there is the same thing about the strength of force. Analyst firms might still be hiring, but maybe not all analyst firms are expanding at the rate that they used to be. I know on in our prep call, we were talking about like the Gartner employee account, the number of Gartner count of employees at Gartner is up, but the last 6 months there's pretty much no growth. Forrester is smaller, notably smaller than it was. We've got junior people coming in who might be less likely to be given briefings, much less likely to be given inquiry, which means the more senior people who you might want to brief don't get taken. So that definitely means big shifts for analysts. And I think it's like really the first big challenge where so many analysts really need to upskill themselves in a structural way. Like normally, just by speaking to vendors and speaking to buyers, you're learning all the time. You don't necessarily need to put in much special effort as an industry. Right. That sounds horribly dismissive. But like basically, if you hang around, you've got to be pretty dumb with all of that information coming into you to not sound like an expert. Like if any of us had to spend all of our time talking to people about carpet, then look, by the end of a couple of months, you're going to sound like an expert in carpet, aren't you? If you spend all that time. I don't even have carpet, right? But that's how that is. But it's much more challenging for analysts, definitely, and then more challenging for their salespeople as well, because if the analysts don't sound like quite so smart, then that makes a difference. And the other thing from my experience as an inquiry customer is that if I submit inquiries, again, this is just like one data point, so what does this matter, right? Just my opinion. But I get the feeling that analysts are much more clear about stating limitations when they go into the conversations. I had an inquiry come back that I submitted to an analyst today, where I'd asked an analyst about his market, which is very similar to my customer's market, and he said, "Well, look, I can talk to you, but I can't really comment on your customer's market, right? I can make some generalities, but your market and my market, that's very similar, really, because you're the guy." but people are being much more, but analysts they have to set expectations a little bit more cautiously now. In not all of them, but many analysts are definitely sounding a much more cautious tone, and I think that makes it harder for them to demonstrate value in a confident way. Yeah. And it might also lead to some analysts like overreaching a little bit, and analysts not in the big firms, but in like the second, third tier terms, there have always been some analysts who've been like a little bit opinionated, a little bit contrarian, slightly asshole-ish. And there's got to be more space for those people, because if the mainstream analysts just become a little bit more muted and cautious, then that means that there's more space. I don't think we really have shock jocks in the analyst industry, but there's more space for people who are relatively more provocative to get a hearing.
Well, I think Rachel, you brought up that you see much more junior. Didn't you say you were seeing more junior analysts at some of the big firms?
Yes,
it's a percentage of what they have.
And I think, and I know some of the analysts that have been around for a long time, they've actually told me that they're seeing it, and it's depressing to see the younger, junior analysts coming in and not really with that background and expertise, and yet they're publishing or they're working. And I do think that AI plays a huge role in that. I don't mean to pick on Gartner, but them specifically. It just seems to me there's a lot of consolidating of data and information that Gartner owns as a whole, and then publishing reports, because at the end of the day, when you've got also analysts teetering on this very fine line between PR or being a spokesperson, expert in the media, their faces are more visible, they're using social media, they're becoming spokespeople like in the mainstream. And they're selling their time to do that. They're selling the, credits or what have you, however they go about doing it, to companies to, hey, if you want us to talk about you on, in our podcast next week, or, if I happen to mention you on when I'm talking to Bloomberg, whatever, we can do that. So it's this very fine line between like and we used to, as AR people, be like, pay for play is awful. We don't do that, but now you're seeing this kind of, switch. And I think what's interesting about that is that you've got firms like Gartner. They don't do that. They don't do custom stuff. You can't hire them to do that. So where is their bread and butter if they're not going to be hiring, big analysts that have been around a long time, that have done both sides of technology? They're going to hire, junior people at a lesser value, use AI to help kind of drive the research. And because that's what they want you to do. They want you to buy reprints and license their research. That's where they make the money. And instead of doing SaaS or briefings or something like that, buy Gartner consulting time, because again, that's big money for them. So,
Right.
It's interesting to see how they both respond to that on both sides. And this changing world of what the analyst is anymore, I think is very interesting.
I wonder if some of that draw of junior people is the lack of people that have the skills that we all have come to associate, that are willing to work for the prices that these these firms pay, because they can, if they've got that expertise and they've that strategic mindset and that ability to foresee the future a little bit and help, they can make lots of money. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for them, and maybe they're having a harder time. I mean, I think they are having a harder time holding on to that kind of talent.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jane. I'm going to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, well, Rachel, I've got a question for you in just a moment. I think you all did a great job of outlining a lot of the challenges that analysts are facing during this time, not just with, the shift in the tech market, but also just the busyness factor. That's just, it's, as you said, harder to get a briefing, or it takes longer, and how many more engagements are out there because of the tech market. If we move along to our next topic, which everyone is very interested in, is the analyst advocacy. How does AR respond to this? And I know, Duncan, we're going to have you kind of take the lead on this, but Rachel, a question came in that I thought would be very right up your alley, specifically because you do work for a vendor. TD Sarma says, given the current trends and potential for tighter marketing budgets, do you believe that aligning AR more closely with product strategy team would optimize its impact for business growth? This focus on product development and strategic initiatives could potentially unlock greater value, even amidst resource constraints. So do you see really a need with these current trends to be more aligned with your product and strategy team?
If you know anything about me, I like to say what we do is analyst strategy, not analyst relations. The strategy, I think, is key to bringing the most value back to your company. But it's hard. You have to make sure that you've got executives that are supporting that, because it's a long game. This is not something that you're going to get short, wins on, right? You're actually working to develop trust between analysts, so that then, your executive will trust their opinion, and then the analyst will actually trust the executive, that they're actually coming to them for true advice and insight, and not just wanting to show the analyst how smart they are, right? So it's it's a really delicate situation, but in my opinion, that is the biggest benefit to any tech company, is to find that analyst out there in the market that can truly help you shape and own who you are. And that it increases their influence. It helps you make sure you're staying relevant, because, at the end of the day, the analyst is talking to the customers that didn't pick you. So you need to have that full message and the full oversight of the story in the market. So that's what I think. Absolutely. If you have to pick and choose, then I would go all day long with product strategy, if you've got that backing in your company to do so.
Yeah. And analysts love that. That's what they hunger to do, is to get in there, get in there and help you. And so many clients vendors just don't, I don't know if they don't give them access, but don't pay attention.
Yeah.
Really seriously consider and incorporate the analyst's knowledge into their business. I mean, I see that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Duncan, you had mentioned, in the previous section of how busy and how much analyst engagement is up due to the marketplace, and so it requires you to work harder on your pitches. Do you want to kind of talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you're focusing on, or what we should focus on as AR professionals moving into 2024 and with the tech market the way it is now?
Yeah, I think getting the balance right between the learn side and the earn side, as Kevin Lucas at Forrester talks about it, or Gartner talks about, like the inbound and the outbound. Analysts want to be listened to. They want to be anticipated. They want to be the thought leaders. And to be honest, I think a lot of vendors struggle in being peers. I think the emphasis on feeding from the analyst into product strategy, which is definitely what Gartner pushes very heavily. Like, Gartner basically says, stop trying to influence us, listen to us, do what we say. The more that you do what we say, the better things are going to be for you, right? So it's ridiculous to call this the kind of happy wife, happy life scenario, but it's a little bit like that, isn't it? But the challenge is that what that leads to is what sociologists call isomorphism. Where everybody in a market converges and imitates the market leader. And it's much harder to differentiate that way. And fundamentally, analysts don't really want people to differentiate. There's an arc of market development, and there are market leaders, and they've got 100 out of 100 function points. And then there are market followers who've got like 20 out of 100 function points. And then they want you to move up, right? They want you to have more functionality, more execution, and more vision, explaining how you're going to prioritize these different pieces of functionality and these different pieces of execution. And I think that leads to AR teams devaluing themselves in the eyes of their colleagues. That rather than being like the logistical pickers up of spokespeople and transporters to the fronts of web cameras and setters down and turners on of mics, they become the other way around, the picker up of analyst insights, and it becomes a kind of intellectual logistics. Either way, they become a conveyor belt rather than an adder of value. And I think there's a huge amount that AR people are not getting right in differentiation and relevance. And I mean, again, I'm just picking on my team's experience, but many things have made us successful. Our clients are smarter than we are. It's our clients that make us successful, obviously. But if in some small modest way I can pick some credit for the team, it's focusing more on the relevance, like really tracking what kinds of problems is that individual analyst talking about. And I've got lots of things in my kitchen. I've only got one container of cinnamon, but if I know somebody is crazy about cinnamon, I'm going to push the cinnamon to the foreground, right? I'm gonna talk about my French toast. I put a whole dessert spoon into the stuff I pour over my French toast. I'm going to foreground that. that relevance. Then getting the experience right. Again, it's a caricature, but you can say that there are some analysts who are much more kind of lean forward analysts, right? They're like active shapers of the conversation, and there are others who are leaning back, like there's a conveyor belt of sushi going around in front of them, and they might pick in an absent-minded way, but then you might see them looking at something as it comes around the corner, and you know, right, okay, it's the eel. That's what they really want. It's the eel there. Then there's also like levels of abstraction, right? Like some people are super focused on the business value story, and for that you need the customer as hero. And then there are other people who are really looking at like the arc of technology development and how far buyers and sellers are able to work in lockstep. You know, there are some markets where buyers and sellers move in lockstep extremely well. And there are others where there's very inefficient markets where buyers are undereducated, where supply chains are highly fragmented. And by thinking about how to be more relevant, what the analyst is like, and then how far this vendor can talk intelligently about the whole market around themselves. You know, these have been, I think, these three keys: the relationship the analyst has with the market, the experientially what is going to be most suitable for them, and then relevance, right? Relevance to the problems that they have. These three things are absolutely the key to driving up, maintaining, even simply to maintain conversion rates and to maintain briefing volumes will be more important. I see an awful lot of analyst firms talking about insights, and I work for a company. The tagline under our logo is insight driven, right? But I see lots of people who think that moving the analyst's opinion into the company is doing insights work. And I think that is not, because I think if you don't have competitive intelligence, if you're not really developing market insights that are specific to your company's market location, then you are simply putting ideas on a conveyor belt and moving them inside.
Sure.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I've got a question from Patrick O'Rourke. He says, I'd like to dig in bit more deep into how Gen AI will disrupt analyst firms. We've been seeing instances of firms making their research library available to natural language queries. But beyond that, how do you think it will disrupt their business models?
I can take that because that was a chapter in my book. No, what we did is looked at and asked analysts about the question of AI, Gen AI and general AI, regular AI, bigger AI, and said, look ahead 5 years. How do you see your job changing? And there was a lot of consensus around the fact, and this goes back to what Rachel was saying about more junior people, that a lot of the junior level work that they've always had, they've always started people out assembling data, coming up with, some force, getting them to kind of start to think and come up with hypotheses and so forth. And the analysts say, I see that role going away, where I can use AI to help bring together the data, not do the thinking for me or not do the writing for me, because that's mine and I won't do that, but we're doing the assembly together for me, and that would save. And then the analysts were saying, another analyst was saying, but that's a real danger, because that's how we build analysts, is through that work of having people do those jobs and develop those skills, and then they become more and more valuable analysts. And if AI takes away that layer of the analyst job, how do we develop analysts? Is really the question.
Yeah. Just to chip in on that, I'd say like two very good metaphors for this are like the contrast and the color in images. Yeah. So for example, we take very extensive notes of the interactions that our analysts do, and we've been looking to see what we can do to use AI to extract sense from those in various ways. One danger is that there's a certain kind of just flatness. Yeah. Everything is just like a fact, right? And then the other is that some things get spotlit. There might be things that are written about a lot, dominant use cases, dominant players, dominant markets where you just get the same 3 points, the same 3 ideas. And what that misses out on is the fact that actually the most profitable markets are often not the mainstream use cases. Yeah, you've got 100 vendors delivering the most common use case. It's not the people who are doing like imagine AI to extract meeting note insights, right? How many apps are there that are doing that, right? All of them, right? Who's using AI to better extract purchase order numbers from emails that have got invoices attached? Fewer, yeah. But maybe you'll make more money where you own a use case that is not at the top of the list, that is not spotlit, that is not high up, yeah. And I think that is one big danger. The other thing is just like the fabric and the interconnectedness of markets. It's always been a challenge, I think, for analysts, for example, in vertical markets, yeah, in being able to draw out specific vertical market trends across technology. Analysts have always struggled to do that, and I think this makes it harder. But I would underscore Robin's point. That is how you make analysts, right? You make analysts by making them look through large amounts of information and tell the difference between what is important and what is not important. And what AI can do is tell you what's loud and what's quiet. The problem is that the best ideas, they don't come from the loudest places. They come from new use cases. They come from the edges, right? If you're only listening to what's happening, especially geographically, right? If you're in the cybersecurity market or the telecoms market and you're only listening to what's happening in the US market, I mean, you're dead, right? You have to be listening to Israel. You have to be listening to the Far East, right? So if you're only focusing on the path most traveled, then it's very hard for you to deliver anything that's insightful, and it can all become just very, very
vanilla.
pablum, yeah.
But I think that dovetails into the strategy part of it, right? Because I mean, you can use AI to say, what are these big trends? What's the loudest thing happening in the market today? But then the application of those into your specific company or technology or this market, that's still a huge value that analysts hopefully will continue to be able to provide, because that takes this and makes it relevant to us. Like, so given these things, what do we do about it, or how do we respond, or what should we do in our strategy and our vision to, be able to address this in the next 5 to 10 years as a vendor, right? And hopefully the analysts will still be advocates of strategy for companies in that way.
Great. Well, thank you so much for digging a little deeper. I have a feeling that we could probably talk for hours on Gen AI and how it affects. And I'm excited to see for 2024 AR Forum what changes, and what's proven there. I do have one more question, but what I think I want to go ahead and do is jump into the SageCircle 2023 awards with Ian Scott. And Bill, we'll try and get to your question at the end here of this session. And if not, I'll make sure that the analysts do respond. So I'd like to introduce Ian Scott from SageCircle, and he is here to talk to us a little bit about the awards and some analyst attitude survey. Let me share my screen. Welcome, Ian.
Hello. Hi.
How are you, Ian?
I'm very well, Robin. Can you hear me, I assume?
We hear you great.
Oh, wonderful. And see me. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Analyst Attitude Survey and the awards which it generates. It's been done. The survey's been run by SageCircle or adjacent organizations for the best part of 22 years now. So there's probably been 40 odd iterations of it, because it's run twice a year. It's sent out to analysts. The survey gets a really wide representation geographically and in terms of the kind of the size of analyst firms, specialism of analyst firms. So it is a representative survey. Many hundreds of analysts take part in every iteration. So we have a mountain of longitudinal data going back many years. A couple of years ago, we launched the awards, and the awards, I'll move on to the next slide in just a moment, but the awards were thinking, we've got all this data, let's aggregate it and find out what it's telling us. Who is like best? Who are the people that is kind of scoring the best in the survey? And we're going to show that in a moment. I'm going to concentrate on one of the awards, which is the best AR team, because that seems relevant to the conversation that we've been having today. And then maybe we could talk about why they've come out on top. But also on the survey, just on one last point about the last one before moving on. Sorry, I'm jumping around, which is making management of the slides difficult. But one further thing is we run the survey and then we accompany it with kind of qualitative interviews, which I'm not going to go into much detail about. So it gives us an understanding why they might be the best, and we can supply that to anyone that's interested in the data. If we move on to the next slide. So this is what we do to create the awards. We aggregate a bunch of variables because there are quite a lot of questions in the survey. We put them into categories which fit naturally together. And today we're going to talk about the best AR team award. Just a little technical point at the bottom. The questions are weighted in such a way so that a question that's got a 5-point scale it's got a question with a 3-point scale isn't more important. So this is a kind of proper net. This isn't just a number of how people answer positively. We take into account people answered negatively and said, no, they're not responsive, or they're not proactive, or I have a poor relationship with them, and all of these different things which we draw together and create a kind of rank from. If we move on to the next one, this gives you an idea of the kind of, I say also rounds actually, because there are about 30 odd vendors in this particular award. So there are a lot of people, a lot of organizations there. So these are very much top end organizations in terms of the AR teams. And they finished in the positions 10 to 4th. So this is the kind of the 7 runners up as it were. So AWS, who have appeared consistently near the top, the upper echelons of this, and their trajectory is generally forward. They're getting a little bit better relative to the others. Capgemini, Dell, HP Enterprise, Salesforce, Samsung, and Verizon, most of which we're used to seeing up near the top, because as you'd expect, there's not an enormous amount of volatility year on year. But we're going to see in the top 3 a really, really distinct movement from one particular vendor. And if we move on to that slide, again, being conscious of time, I'm getting through this as quickly as I can. And here's the top 3. So last year's winner, Nokia, have dropped to 2nd. I'm just going to tell you, and 3rd place, it's actually Ericsson. We've had a problem with the kind of how the visuals rendered in the slide. But 3rd was Ericsson, 2nd was Nokia. Now they appear every time up near the top, and it may be, I mean, it's an interesting question. I'm not actually really a domain expert. I'm a statistician. I'm a researcher. I work with numbers. I generate models of different kinds. So I don't know that much about the tech sector at all. I'm kind of essentially a layperson. But I'm interested if companies like Nokia and Ericsson, which are not working at a kind of hyperscale and work perhaps more in particular industries, it's easier as an AR team to work there than it is at, say, AWS or Microsoft. And perhaps a comparator of those, IBM sits at the top. Now, I'm aware, because we gave these awards and we talked to IBM about the awards they'd received, that they had changed their strategy in the past year or so. And this clearly has reaped awards because they've moved up very significantly, very substantially from, I think, last time just inside the top 10, a couple of years before that, outside the top 10, and now first, surging up several places in 1 year to the top, replacing last year's winner, Nokia, who appear consistently and predictably very near the top. So there are things that our AR team are doing which work very, very well with the analysts they deal with. So remember, these scores are the scores of analysts. In the survey, we ask people only to score those companies they're familiar with and they feel they can actually answer knowledgeably about. We don't ask someone to talk about a company from outside their sector of expertise. So these are people who are industry experts talking about these companies and these vendors and talking about the relations they have with AR teams. So just to conclude, and I'm sorry, that was a kind of rambly overview of what we do in a few minutes, but just to conclude, this year's best, as ranked by analysts themselves, is the AR team of IBM.
Thank you, Ian, for that. I have a quick question for you from Jerome. How does the analyst define service for best service?
Oh, okay. So we define service, Jerome, in this sense, because we ask a bunch of constituent questions. We don't say who provides the best service, because as you have intimated in the question, that could mean a multitude of things. We have a variety of questions which all contribute to it. So for example, we have a question which says, how responsive has this vendor been to your request? How strong is your relationship with the people you work with. I mean, essentially, we're asking, do you like them? We talk about your level of trust with the vendor as well. So it is actually a composite of a bunch of questions, and we call it best service received when we add it all up.
That's great. Thank you. We do have two more questions from Bill and Carstens, but I think what we'd like to do is, maybe respond by email, or maybe put that in the Analyst Relations Forum on LinkedIn, and that way we can continue this conversation. Just with a few minutes left, Duncan, did you want to speak to next year's 2024 forum, or any comments on that?
That is exactly what I would love to talk about, yes. So people may know we had the first forum in 2013, which was a physical event, and then obviously the pandemic happened, and then it's been online for the last few years. Next year we are back in person. It will be a hybrid event, because we know, of course, everybody wants to come to Edinburgh, but not everybody can make the journey. It's beautiful. You should, if you've not been here, you are really missing out. It's just a spectacular city and an amazing country. Very beautiful. But the 27th of June is the day that we have booked in to host the 2024 Analyst Relations Forum at the University of Edinburgh Business School. So we have a beautiful space booked out for that. I think we might be reaching out to some analyst firms for sponsorship to make sure that we can have, like, not only haggis, but maybe other things available at lunchtime as well. And it will be just a fantastic opportunity to get people from the analyst relations side, almost certainly some analysts there as well, to have this kind of conversation in a more real way when we're face to face. And yeah, please join the Analyst Relations Forum, sign up there, and we'll almost certainly have a booking form out early in the new year, I would have thought. In fact, why don't we even try and get a booking form on as soon as possible, and then send that out along with a link to the recording to this event. I kind of suspect that if you wait like 10 minutes after the end of this webinar and then log back in, I think the recording might even just be sitting here available for anybody to help themselves.
Great, wonderful. And we'll make sure to also share Ian Scott's slides. I know that was requested. So with that, this does conclude the 2023 Analyst Relations Forum. I wanted to thank all of you attendees for joining with us, and we do appreciate all the questions and comments, and a special thanks to our guest speakers, Duncan, Rachel, Ian, and Robin. We appreciate your time and look forward to continuing the conversation on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you. Bye-bye.